Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. The first fire did not begin as brightness. It began as listening. Before sparks, before ash, before the patient charcoal that remembers yesterday's heat. There was a hush so complete it felt like a hand upon the brow of the world. In that hush an ember dreamt, not yet light, merely a wish to become light, the way a seed is a wish to become a tree. Around it lay the uncarved night, a chamber of possibility. Stone leaned toward stone like elders in council. Air waited with the patience of water sealed in deep wells. Across the floor of the dark, a god walked without footsteps, the maker whose heart measured, whose tongue remembered. He leaned close to the sleeping ember, and the ember felt itself noticed. "Do you know your name?" the god asked, not aloud, but in the grammar of attention. The ember did not know. It only knew wanting. Wanting is the oldest language. "Then I will teach you," said the god, and he cupped his hands to make a small house for heat. He did not strike flint. He did not command. He breathed, and the breath came like kindness offered to a frightened animal. The ember received. In receiving, it learned. Something within it gathered. Darkness thinned around a point no larger than a grain of pomegranate seed. A thread of red, the barest thought of glow. "Say your name," the god invited. The ember tried. It pushed against the inside of itself and made a sound too small to hear. But the god heard because what he listened for was not volume. It was willingness. "That is enough," he said. "A name is a door. Open a little today. Tomorrow more." He set the ember upon a shallow stone dish and laid dry reeds around it. Not to smother, not to hurry, but to keep it company. Fire grows faster among friends. He placed 2 bowls beside the dish. One held water for humility. One held air in the form of a bellows for courage. "Light," said the god, "is not a conquest. It is an apprenticeship. Learn the breath, and you will learn the world." The ember listened to breath. In out, in out. Each exhale found the ember and taught it how to be larger without becoming proud. The reeds took the lesson too. They did not burn yet. They merely remembered how to be dry. A woman entered then, hands reddened by clay, eyes careful. She had the stance of someone who had broken many vessels and found in each break a map to the next attempt. The god nodded to her. "This is Marin," he said. "She knows how to carry heat from one hour to the next." Marin bowed to the ember the way one bows to a newborn. "Do you want," she asked, "to be useful?" The ember's answer was a small lift of color. Wanting brightened. The reed sighed. "Useful is a beautiful word," the god said, "but it can be cruel if it does not rest." He gestured to the dish. "Today we teach it to speak. Tomorrow it will teach us to listen." They fed it gently. A shaving of cedar, a curl of palm, a lock of old rope that remembered boats. The ember tasted each thing and learned. The red thread thickened. The seed unfolded into a petal of flame. Where it touched air, the air learned to glow. Where it touched reed, the reed learned to let go. "What is flame?" Marin asked. The god did not answer at once. He watched the small fire bend toward his breath like a child leaning to a story. Only when the ember steadied did he speak. "Flame is a syllable of light," he said. It is how creation pronounces its longing. Marin nodded and placed a small pot near the heat, not upon it. Inside the pot sat water and grain, unmarried, unimpressed with each other. If the fire learns to speak, she said softly, perhaps they will learn to listen. The ember heard the word speak and reached. A brief flare, then modesty again. Not yet a voice, but the idea of voice. The pot's lid trembled once, like a heart concluding a prayer. The god placed both hands upon the stone floor. There is a serpent, he said, as if talking to the ground. It lives in confusion. It will come when the world grows loud. Your task, small one, is to be a different kind of sound. The ember understood the way a seed understands rain, in promise, not detail. They worked in rhythms that made sense to the body. 3 breaths of bellows, a rest to let the heat remember itself, a whisper to the reeds as they leaned in, a gratitude to the bowls waiting nearby. When a spark jumped too far, Marin touched it with a wet fingertip and taught it boundaries without shame. When the dish cracked, the god did not scold the stone. He turned the fracture into a channel where ash could gather and become tomorrow's ink. Say your name again, he told the ember. This time, when it tried, the room answered. Shadows learned to kneel. The pot's lid rose, a small courtesy, and the scent of grain remembering sweetness moved through the chamber like a rumor of harvests. What did it say? Marin asked, eyes shining. It said, I am here to help. That is a good name. She smiled into the glow. But it is many words. Names begin long, the god said, and become simple. In time, this one will be only a breath. He leaned closer. In time, it will be a word every creature can say without learning a language. They fed it a ribbon of olive wood. The flame tested bitterness, learned it, and chose gentleness. They fed it a nest of straw. The flame learned delight and almost forgot itself. The bellows recalled it. They fed it a ribbon of bark with a spiral hidden in its fibers. The flame read the spiral aloud, and Marin, hearing, felt a door open somewhere in the city of her chest. What did it say this time? She whispered. It said, You are not alone. The god looked pleased, then thoughtful. Now we must teach it silence. At this the flame seemed to flicker defensively, like a child reminded of bedtime. The god laughed under his breath. Hush, he said kindly. Silence is not your enemy. It is your grammar. He raised the bellows once, inhale and again, not exhale but a held breath, a pause with edges. The flame steadied but did not grow. Marin counted softly to 7. The pot simmered without boiling. The air learned patience, and the ember learned not to mistake stillness for abandonment. Outside the chamber, the world tried on shapes. Stone stacked itself and then unstacked, practicing the notion of a wall. Water gathered shadows of fish not yet born. Far away, a hill raised its shoulders and wondered if it was a mountain. Creation rehearsed. Within, they gave the ember a story, not with words, with care. Care is the first story every tool understands. Marin placed a second pot, smaller, with milk and a handful of crushed dates. The god set a flat stone near the dish so heat could travel without leaving home. Together they showed the flame what it means to be dependable. You will be asked, the god said to it, to be spectacle. People will want you to leap. They will want danger they can control. You must remember that your first promise was bread. The flame lowered itself as if bowing. From a corner of the chamber, a child's voice spoke. They had not seen the boy enter. He carried the unself-conscious quiet of a cat. He knelt, eyes wide, palms empty. What do I give it? Nothing loud, Marin said. She held out a thin shaving of wood, almost transparent. A word so soft it could be mistaken for sleep. He placed it upon the rim of the dish. The flame accepted without rush. For an instant the boy's face was all light, the sort of light that does not glare, but understands. He smiled, and the chamber felt younger. "What is its name?" he asked. Marin glanced at the god. The god glanced at the flame. The flame made a shape like a heartbeat and spoke in the only way it could, by changing the color of the air. Not red, not gold. Something between the two. The color of arrival. "It has many," the god said. "Hearth, lamp, beacon, warning, song. Today we call it voice." The boy nodded as if he had been told where bread will be tomorrow. Important but also obvious. He sat back on his heels and listened to the voice as it told him a story of the first time Ash learned to draw on stone. Hours became kind. The grain clothed itself in sweetness. The milk sighed into thickness. The chamber's edges softened the way a mother's hands soften after the first winter with a child. The god dozed with one eye open. Marin watched the pot as if the future might try to perform an escape trick inside it. The boy fell asleep sitting up and dreamed without leaving the room. Then, from far under the floor, came a tremor subtle at first, the way a doubt is subtle. The dish rattled. The bellows shivered in their basket. The flame lifted its face. The god's eye opened fully. "Do you feel that?" he asked the air. The air replied with a thin whistle through the kiln vent. Marin placed her hand on the stone. "Something turns in the deep," she said. "The serpent," the god answered, not afraid. "It hears the world trying new sentences and prefers the old ones where fear is the verb." He looked at the flame. "This is your lesson. Speak, but do not shout. Warm, but do not brag. The dark believes it is permanent. Teach it to be tender." The tremor subsided as quickly as it had come, like a threat that remembers dignity. The flame, who had been voice for only an afternoon, lowered itself and practiced being small without being less. "Very good," the god said. "Tomorrow, we ask you to learn another word. Answer." He turned to Marin. "We will carry it to the threshold at dawn. The world will ask its first question. We will let the flame reply." "What if it says the wrong thing?" she asked. "It will not," he said. "It learned its name before it spoke." Night drew a clean line through the chamber. They banked the coals the way one tucks in a child, not to confine, but to give courage to rest. The pot gave up its last bubble and smiled in the way pots do, by smelling like home. The boy stirred, took one sleepy breath of sweetness, and slept again with his worries put somewhere they could be found in the morning. The god stood, stretched, and looked toward the door where the dark was thickest. "Every dawn is a question," he said to no one in particular. "Every flame is an answer that loves questions." He bowed to the ember, now the voice, and left the chamber to its soft arithmetic of heat. Marin placed her palm over the dish and felt not burn, but presence. "Thank you," she whispered, as if to a teacher who had not embarrassed her lesson. The ember did what fire does at the end of a good day. It remembered. It made a small circle of color where it had been dull before. It rehearsed saying its name without waking anyone. It slept, which for flame is simply staying. Outside, the stars braided themselves into a sentence the night could keep. The serpent turned once, disappointed. Bread cooled on the sill of a house that had not yet been built. And in the dim place where names learned to be single word. The night was not yet gone when the gods stirred. The embers still whispered in their shallow dish, each glow a memory of breath. Around them, shadows had learned humility, staying close, listening. Maren woke first. She stretched her palms toward the warmth and murmured, "Still alive." The gods smiled. Alive is a generous word. Let us say learning. He rose, and the air around him obeyed without command. The walls trembled, not from fear, but anticipation. Outside, the sky was gray with the promise of dawn. Somewhere beyond the hills, the serpent shifted again, the sound of something ancient remembering it was hungry. The god bent low to the flame. "Today you will speak," he said softly. "But not for me." The ember flared once, a polite bow of light. Maren gathered the dish into her hands. Its edges were warm but not cruel. The heat had learned restraint. They carried the voice toward the threshold. Each step deepened the sound of air, soft, rhythmic, like the slow breathing of a sleeping world. When they reached the open arch, the god paused. Outside, the horizon was still deciding what color to be. The sea of night rolled backward like a tide, revealing sand made of mist. On that sand lay the first question, not carved, not spoken, but waiting. Maren sensed it before she saw it. "It's trembling," she whispered. The god nodded. "All questions tremble before they are born." He placed the dish upon the ground. The flame brightened and tilted itself toward the edge of the light, where dark met dawn. For the first time, the world noticed itself. A wind rose, came from nowhere or from everywhere, the breath between stars. It passed through the flame, and in that passing, sound began. Not a word, not even a syllable, a tone, soft as the sigh of rain before it falls. The god closed his eyes. "It speaks." Maren listened. The tone wove through her ribs, gentle but insistent. She felt her pulse answering, matching rhythm with rhythm. "What is it saying?" she asked. The god smiled. "It asks what every light asks the dark. Who am I for?" The question rippled across the sky. The stars dimmed, listening. The wind hesitated, learning the shape of the words. Beneath the earth the serpent stilled. The god answered, not with his voice, but with his breath, the first echo. "You are for the ones who cannot see." The flame bent low, as though humbled. A thin thread of gold slipped upward, curling toward the clouds. The dawn tasted it and turned rosy in gratitude. But something else stirred, a shadow born from the edges of the question. It rose behind them, slow, uncertain, as if made of old smoke. "What is that?" Maren asked. The god's face did not change. "Every answer has a twin doubt. It follows the brave." The shadow moved closer to the flame. The voice did not retreat. It watched. Within its glow, a whisper formed, not of sound, but of will. "Come," said the flame. The shadow hesitated, then stepped forward. For an instant, they touched, light and absence, recognition and refusal. And in that meeting, the first spark of balance was born. The god whispered, "This is how truth learns to walk." Marin exhaled, her breath trembling. "It's beautiful. It is dangerous," he replied. "If the flame forgets humility, it will become hunger." As if it heard, the voice lowered itself, dimming just enough to remind the world that silence was still sacred. From far away came a cry, not human but something trying to be. The world was finding its throat. The god turned toward the sound and said quietly, "They are waking." "Who?" asked Marin. "The listeners." Beyond the horizon, small figures flickered into being, beings of breath and clay, not yet given names. Their eyes reflected the flame's color. They looked upon the light with wonder, and something within them, memory, maybe, recognized it. The voice lifted again, stronger now, and spoke once more. The sound carried across the sea of dawn, soft as forgiveness, bright as beginning. It said, "Remember warmth before you remember fire." And the newborn creatures wept, though they did not know why. The god closed his eyes. "It has learned compassion," he said, "faster than I expected." Marin smiled through her tears. Then the world might survive itself. But beneath the ground, the serpent turned again, slower, thoughtful. It whispered into the cracks of the earth, "Where there is compassion, there will be fear." And so the lesson continued. The god took the dish once more, cradling it in both hands. "Come," he said to the flame, "you have spoken to the dawn. Now you must listen to the day." As they walked back into the chamber, the sky broke open in gold. The first son of the world was born, not from power, but from patience. And in its heart burned a small ember that had learned to say, "I am here to help." The voice slept again, but this time its dream glowed across the world. The day arrived not as an explosion, but as a sigh long, warm, and steady. The world, newborn and blinking, spread its arms beneath a sun that did not yet understand its purpose. Marin stood at the edge of the chamber where the god had gone silent. The voice slept within its dish, its ember dim but breathing. Outside, the young sky stretched endlessly, filled with shapes learning to move. Mountains practiced stillness. Rivers rehearsed motion. Even the air seemed uncertain whether to dance or rest. She whispered, "It's quieter now." The god, seated beside the ember, nodded. Creation always grows quiet before it listens. The first lesson of life is to remember who gave it breath. He lifted his gaze to the horizon, where light bent upon itself like thought folding inward. "They have seen the flame," he murmured, "but they have not yet felt it." "Who?" Marin asked. "The ones we heard yesterday, the listeners. They remember warmth but not origin." He rose, motion slow, deliberate. "Come. The flame must return what it borrowed." Marin followed as he carried the dish into the open air. The dawn had stretched into noon. The light was steady now, neither curious nor shy. Beneath their feet, the earth sighed, soft, grateful, tired. The god knelt and placed the voice upon a stone. "Breathe," he said. The flame obeyed. A small pulse rippled through the air, invisible yet unmistakable. Marin felt her hair lift, her skin hum, her bones remember. "What is it doing?" she asked. The god smiled faintly. calling home what was given away. Breath does not belong to one thing alone. It moves in circles. As he spoke, the horizon shimmered. The air grew thick, heavy with something unseen. Then, like mist rising from a dream, the listeners appeared. Dozens of them. Figures of clay and wind, light and shadow, their faces curious but kind. They moved without sound, guided by a rhythm older than sound itself. The god gestured to them. "Come closer." One of the figures, a small one with eyes bright as dew, stepped forward. It reached toward the flame but stopped, trembling. "It remembers us," said Marin softly. "No," replied the god. "It remembers what they are made of." The small figure leaned closer. The flame tilted toward it, sensing something familiar. Between them the air thickened, then expanded. A breath passed between them, light traveling both ways. The figure gasped, its chest rising for the first time. Its eyes widened. It had learned to inhale. Marin covered her mouth. "It's alive." The god nodded. "Every breath is borrowed fire." The rest of the listeners began to breathe. One by one their chests lifted. The air filled with soft sound sighs, gasps, the astonished rhythm of beginning. Then came the next sound, laughter. Fragile, unsure, like glass learning it could sing. The god closed his eyes. "And now," he said, "they remember joy." Marin felt tears form. "Will they always?" "Until they forget who gave it to them," the god answered. A shadow crossed the light. The serpent had risen again, its vast body curling along the horizon like smoke that refused to fade. The god's expression darkened. "It listens too." The serpent's voice slithered through the wind, smooth, ancient, tired. "You give them breath, yet you do not teach them silence. You give them warmth, yet you do not teach them fear." The god did not look up. "They will learn both soon enough." The serpent's laughter rumbled through the ground. "Then the balance will hold." It sank again beneath the soil, leaving tremors behind. Marin turned to the god. "Is that what this is? Balance?" He sighed. "Balance is not peace, Marin. It is the tension that keeps peace alive." The flame flickered, uncertain, as if it too understood the burden of its own gift. The god placed a hand above it and whispered, "Remember who you are when the wind forgets you." The flame steadied. "Now," he said, "it must rest again. The next voice will not come from fire." "Then from what?" asked Marin. "From what listens after fire, the heart." The wind quieted. The sun dimmed, as though bowing its head in reverence. And for a brief, impossible moment, all creation exhaled together. A single, shared breath that reached back to the first silence before the first spark. The god smiled faintly. "Even stillness remembers its teacher." The voice dimmed into sleep once more, leaving warmth behind. Marin closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." The god looked at her gently. "Never thank the flame," he said. "Thank what dared to speak through it." The sky grew gold again, slow and patient. Somewhere far below, the serpent stirred in its endless dream. Above, the first birds, unseen until now, began to hum, their notes trembling like newborn prayers. The god looked toward the horizon. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "the world will learn the difference between speech and song. The sun had crossed the middle of the sky, and yet the light felt fragile, as if it were remembering what it meant to shine. The flame had fallen silent once more, its ember curled inward, dreaming of what it had created. Maren sat near the god, her knees drawn close, the weight of quiet pressing upon her. The wind hummed softly through the open stones, carrying the scent of something ancient. Not smoke, not dust, but memory. "It feels different today," she said, "as if the world is listening for something." The god's eyes remained closed. "It is. The world is waiting for its own echo." "Echo?" He nodded. "Every creation must learn to speak its reflection. Until then, it only breathes half its truth." He extended his hand toward the dish. The flame flickered once in acknowledgement. "We gave them warmth, and they found breath. Now they must learn tone, the sound of meaning." Maren tilted her head. "You mean song?" A faint smile touched the god's face. "Yes, song is how silence forgives itself." The air stirred. From beyond the chamber, soft vibrations began. A rhythm like heartbeat and rainfall mingled. It came from the newly born beings, the listeners. They were gathering near the valley, their forms moving like waves under the young sun. Maren stood. "They're calling to each other." "They are answering," said the god, without knowing why. He rose, and together they walked toward the open valley. The land shimmered with color. Reds of clay, golds of sand, greens faint and trembling as they began to live. At the heart of it, the listeners circled the first fire. Not the god's flame, but one born from their own hands. A flicker of memory passed from the voice itself. Their murmurs rose in unison, uneven, trembling, but filled with intent. The god watched, his eyes bright with quiet pride. "They've stolen your gift," Maren said softly. He shook his head. "No, they've inherited it. Creation was never mine to keep." One of the listeners, a tall figure with skin like stone and eyes of morning light, stepped forward. It began to hum, low at first, then higher, a note that resonated through the valley. Others joined. The tones mingled and broke, weaving threads of air into something larger. A sound that felt both sorrowful and radiant. Maren gasped. "It's like the world is singing back." The god closed his eyes. "That is the echo." But as the song deepened, the ground shuddered. Beneath the rhythm, another tone rose, darker, hollow, vibrating through the stone. The serpent was awake. Its voice slithered into the melody, shaping discord from harmony. "You give them sound, and they will name you. You give them names, and they will own you." The song faltered. Fear spread through the listeners' chorus. Some covered their ears, some fell to the ground. Maren cried, "They're frightened." The god raised his hand. "Then let them learn courage." He stepped forward, his voice rising, not loud, but pure. His tone carried through the valley, striking the air like sunlight through storm. The serpent's growl wavered, then withdrew, folding into the cracks of the earth. The listeners opened their eyes. The flame between them steadied, its color deepening from gold to crimson. Maren whispered, "You saved them." "No," said the god. "They saved themselves. They listened through fear." He turned to her. "Do you hear it now?" Maren frowned. "Hear what?" "The silence after courage. That is song's true heart. For a long while neither spoke. The world breathed in rhythm, slow, gentle, complete. The god bent to the flame again. You have learned to echo, he whispered. Now learn to wait. The flame's light softened, as though in obedience. Smoke rose, winding through the air in graceful spirals. Within that smoke, shapes formed, fragments of memory, stories not yet written. Maren reached toward it. What are those? Possibilities, said the god. The stories the world might choose to remember. One shape drifted close to her. A faint vision of hands holding another flame, somewhere far in the future. She smiled. They'll remember us. The god's gaze turned distant. If they remember at all, it will not be by name. It will be through warmth. The wind carried away the last of the song, scattering it among the mountains. The valley fell still again, and dusk began to breathe its colors into the edges of the sky. As the stars awakened, Maren whispered, So, what comes next? The god looked toward the horizon. Ashes, he said, and from them the memory of light. The flame dimmed. The first stars shimmered like sparks above the sleeping world. And beneath it all, in the deep rhythm of earth and silence, something new began to hum. Not flame, not breath, not word, but remembrance. Night had stretched across the newborn world like a vast breathing veil. The stars were still young, uncertain in their brightness, flickering as though testing the patience of the dark. Maren sat beside the fading flame. Its glow was faint, more ember than fire, a quiet pulse inside the stone dish. The god had not spoken in hours. His eyes were half closed, as though listening to something far beyond sound. At last, he said softly, Do you know what happens when warmth remembers itself? Maren shook her head. It becomes memory, he whispered, and memory is never still. The words trembled in the air. The ember flared once, then dimmed again. A heartbeat trapped in ash. Maren leaned closer. It's dying. The god smiled faintly. No, it's remembering how to begin. He reached out, and for the first time he didn't touch the flame, he breathed toward it. The ember shuddered, then exhaled light. It rose into a single spark, drifting upward like a thought set free. It hung there, trembling. Then it fell back, not onto stone, but into Maren's open palm. She gasped. It's warm. It knows you, said the god. You've listened long enough to carry it. But I can't hold fire. You can hold what fire remembers. The spark pulsed once against her skin, then sank beneath it, disappearing into her palm. For a moment, she felt nothing but heat. Then voices. They weren't words, but echoes. The laughter of the listeners, the sigh of wind through new leaves, the hum of water beneath stone. It was as if every living thing had whispered its beginning into her blood. She clutched her chest. It's too much. The god's gaze softened. Creation always is. He turned his eyes to the horizon. Now you understand why silence was sacred. Maren's breath shook. What do I do with this? Keep it, he said, for when they forget. Before she could speak, the ground trembled, not with rage, but with awakening. The serpent had risen once more, but its form was different now. translucent, vast, its coils shimmering with starlight instead of shadow. Its voice echoed from every direction. The fire has left its maker. The circle breaks. The god rose. No, it widens. Then so shall I, the serpent hissed. The sky split. Lines of light and darkness twisted together, colliding, separating, merging again. The world itself seemed to breathe through them, creation fighting against its own memory. Maren staggered. It's burning everything. The god's voice was calm. No, it's teaching the world to choose what to keep. All around them, flame bloomed from soil and stone. Not destruction, but revelation. Shapes of forgotten dreams appeared. Faces, places, moments that had existed only in thought. Each burned bright, then vanished, leaving faint trails of warmth behind. This is what memory does, the god said. It cannot rest. It wants to live again. The serpent's tone deepened. And when it does, what will you be, flame-bearer? Maren felt her pulse in her hands. The heat grew until she could no longer tell where her skin ended and light began. I am what you fear, she said quietly. I remember. The serpent recoiled, its body unraveling into smoke. The light in the sky steadied, spreading like dawn. The god turned to her, eyes filled with something like awe. You have spoken the first true word. What did I say? He smiled. You gave the flame a voice again. Maren looked down at her hands. They were still glowing faintly, the fire sleeping beneath her skin. Will it stay? For as long as you remember. They stood together as the new light spread across the world. The listeners emerged from the shadows, gathering around the last embers of the original flame. None of them spoke, but each raised a hand to their chest, where warmth still lingered. Maren understood. They too carried a piece of it. The god looked upon them all. Now the world has memory, he said, but soon it will seek meaning. Maren tilted her head. What's the difference? Memory is light, he said. Meaning is the shape it chooses to cast. She smiled faintly. Then we've only begun. The god's gaze softened. We always have. Above them, dawn began. Not the first nor the last, but one that belonged wholly to remembrance. And as the light reached across the horizon, the serpent's shadow bowed once to the fire it could not extinguish. The god whispered, almost to himself, even eternity forgets, but fire does not. Maren watched the glow fade into the waking world, and for the first time, she did not feel small. The morning after the world's first dawn arrived softly. The air was heavy with warmth, but beneath it, a quiet sorrow lingered. The serpent's shadow had vanished, but its echo hummed beneath the soil, waiting, remembering. Maren stood by the valley's edge, her hands faintly glowing. The fire that once spoke now lived within her, quieter, but awake. Every heartbeat carried a whisper, a pulse of old language she was still learning to understand. The god sat upon a stone nearby, watching the horizon fade into color. Do you know what happens? He said. When the flame remembers itself? Maren turned. It becomes eternal? He smiled. It becomes patient. The wind drifted through the hollow where their first flame had burned. The ashes shimmered faintly, forming shifting patterns in the light. Maren crouched to touch them, and as she did, they rose, gently like breath. Shapes appeared again. The faces of the listeners, the serpent, even her own, all made of dust and glow. "They remember," she whispered. "They always do," said the god. "But memory changes each time it is recalled. That is how the world dreams." The figures dissolved into air, leaving behind only one ember, still burning. Maren felt its warmth against her palm. "Another beginning," she said. "Not beginning," the god corrected softly. "Continuation. The flame never starts. It only remembers where it left off." He stood, his shadow stretching long in the light. "Soon, I must rest." Maren's heart tightened. "Rest?" He nodded. "Even the voice of creation must sleep. The world no longer needs to hear me. It has learned to speak for itself." The listeners approached from the far ridge, moving as one. They carried in their hands their own small fires, the gifts that had once been the god's alone. They knelt before him not in worship, but in recognition. The god's voice deepened, quiet as twilight. "Keep these flames alive, not in temples, not in fear, but in memory. For one day, even gods forget why they began." He turned to Maren. "You will guide them, not as priest, but as remembrance." Her throat tightened. "How can I lead what remembers more than I?" "Because memory without heart is only echo," he said. "And you carry both." He placed his hand upon her shoulder, and she felt warmth spread through her body. Not burning, but steady, endless. The sky shifted. Light began to spiral upward, gathering above them in radiant silence. Maren stepped back. "What's happening?" The god smiled faintly. "The flame is returning home." The light rose higher, folding into itself until it became a single point above the valley. A star, pulsing softly. Maren fell to her knees. "Will you return?" "When the world forgets its warmth," the god's voice echoed, already distant. "I will remember it again." The light faded into the sky, leaving behind a hush so vast it seemed to breathe. The listeners bowed their heads. Maren stood slowly, her palms open to the wind. The last ember on the ground flickered once, then went dark, but its glow remained inside her, pulsing with life. She whispered, "So this is what forever feels like." From the mountains, the first rivers of molten light began to move again, winding like veins through the land. The air shimmered with new dawn. The world exhaled. Maren turned to the listeners. "He is gone," she said, "but the flame is not." They lifted their small fires toward the rising sun. Their warmth gathered, spreading through the valley, touching stone, tree, and sky. And in that light, for the first time since creation began, the world sang without its maker. The song was gentle, filled with loss, yet luminous with gratitude. Maren closed her eyes, and in the space between her breaths, she heard the flames whisper one last time, "I am not gone. I am remembering through you." She smiled. "Then we will never be alone." The wind moved, the horizon glowed, and the stars above shimmered, each one a fragment of that first fire, remembering its origin in silence. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.